So if the fastest and the smartest way to develop is to increase the women's workforce participation, then we need to look into the care economy. We cannot confine our discussions to, just a paid sector or monetized sector. Now, what could be the public policy narratives regarding this? As I mentioned earlier, Finance Commission. Prima facie, we may not think that Finance Commission can, improve the life of women. How can they do that? Because their primary mandate is to take a decision on the devolution of funds, or how to give the tax transfers, of course based on a scientific formula. So the argument was that in that scientific formula, the indicators, the criteria which gets into this formula are the, like population. And it was a huge debate because finance commissions have decided that they will move away from the 1971 population to recent population. Then the states, they bounced back. The states which control the population bounced back, and they pleaded that how can you do this, because the states in which the population is controlled, those states will suffer if you take the decision that they will use the recent population data to devolve the funds. But that was partially corrected in the formula by using a variable related to the demographic transition, that is TFR, the total fertility rate, into the formula. But this is of course a gender aware variable, but I may not say that it could be a direct variable that related to gender discrimination. And the other variables are per capita income, that distance variable, then area, then you have a new variable on climate change. Climate change is a mandate of Finance Commission. So if the argument or the debate goes like this, the Finance Commission's primary mandate is to offset the fiscal disabilities across the jurisdictions. If that is the primary mandate, then how can socio-economic backwardness get into the discussions? Socio-economic backwardness related indicators needs to be into specific purpose transfers rather than getting into the unconditional grants based on a formula, a scientific formula. If that is the case, the state's fiscal autonomy or the decisions in which a state can move ahead by prioritization of spending, that may be limited in the sense, conditional grants, they are tied grants and it is top down. So what is the flexibility of the state to take decisions in a top down, specific purpose or a conditional grant? But the formula based grant is unconditional. So if a state gets a lot of money unconditional in nature, untied in nature, then state governments can prioritize their spending pattern. And if the state governments decide that status of women in our country is crucial, their disparity in the workforce, their disparity in the wages are crucial, such kind of decisions can be made excellent at the level of states or even at the third tier. But the top down policies, that's what we economists call as one size fits all policies. Such policies can fail. And the moment we talk about the gender disparity in wages, one thing I need to flag, especially in the context of a recession, crisis, or even in the context of COVID pandemic, we may look into the data of gender gap in wages. And moment we see that the gaps have reduced, we may rejoice. But that gap might have got reduced because of the downward harmonization of men's wages. But that's not exactly what we talk about the moment we talk about the disparity in gender wages, because we don't want men's wages to be down to reduce that gap. What we are arguing for is increase the wages and have it parity in the wage level between men and women, but not through the downward harmonization of men's wages. But when jobs are less, when salaries go down, when there is fiscal consolidation or the fiscal austerity measures, then the government may prone to curtail their spending and curtail salaries, decrease employment opportunities. So that's why we have to look into the macroeconomic framework of the gender disparity. What is a macroeconomic framework of gender disparities? Because the moment we talk about the gender disparity in labor market, it is not a matter of micro concern. It's a macroeconomic question. Because, fiscal austerity measures, if that is floated, if the fiscal consolidation in our state or in our country is floated through expenditure compression than through the tax buoyancy path, that will affect gender related human development. Why? Expenditure compression means the first cut will be on social sector spending, human development related spending, and that will have a huge repercussion on economic growth recovery, and it may even lead to humanitarian crisis. So that's why this moment we are waiting for our next budget. We have to wait and see. There will be curtailing in spending, or they will find innovative sources of financing the deficit and own the concept that deficit is good, because the gender disparity is a macroeconomic question. We can no longer argue that gender disparity just get confined to intra-household behavior and those kind of micro patterns. No, it is a macroeconomic question. Labor market, it is not a sectoral issue at all. It's a macroeconomic question. That's why, we need to look into the gender disparity, unequal pay, all these from the macroeconomic perspective, because that macroeconomic framework, its constraints, that get into these disparities. And the way a country, a constitution holds equality, that also gets into, other kind of equality questions in the context of a country. Because how you define equality in that sense, in India, we have a wonderful constitution. Certain articles are directly referred to, the women's empowerment, reducing gender discrimination in our country. But why that legal fiat? Those constitutionally provided, that guarantees are not getting translated into real outcome. That's because this issues related to gender discrimination is deep rooted in our country. It needs to be tackled at the societal level as well. But we need to work together. The stakeholders are multiple in this case. It's not only economists and academia. We need to work with the civil society organizations. We need to work with the law experts. And the stakeholders, that heterogeneity is very relevant and very crucial in tackling these issues. So maybe we can wait and see in the next budget, the gender budget, how that promising framework will be used to reduce the disparity in the labor market. We need to wait and see. Because in the context of pandemic, when a country design economic stimulus packages, there are two components to it. One is you have to do instantaneous correction of the cyclicality issues, that you think that the growth downturn is cyclical, and if you correct for those cyclicality, you get the growth upturn. But that may not be the case. You need to work out the structural bottlenecks. Structural bottlenecks in the sense, you need to work the labor market, you need to work with the banking sector, you need to look into other sectoral issues including the farm sector. So, it is not easy that the moment you call out the cyclicality issues and think that an economic stimulus package will do wonders. That is not the case. That is why we use this crisis as an opportunity to get into the structural reforms. And the structural reforms, the prime component is labor market reforms. But what has happened in the labor market reforms in our country recently is like without any proper consultations, we have used the ordinance route, right, to get into the correction of the labor market disparities. But that could not work. That cannot work. But instead of a quick ordinance route, if you get into the tripartite consultations between labor, management, and the government, and you take decisions which are informed decisions, then that can also correct the disparities in the labor market. These are the quick things which came to my mind. So my punch point or the punch line is, it's a macroeconomic question, and you cannot just work out these issues